Hi everyone, and welcome back to Dimensional Wellness. This is DeeDee, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. Exchanging some energy, okay? This full moon has been absolutely crazy. Even last night was absolutely wild, and I'll do a story time on those things later. And then I'm probably going to do the Santa Muerte dreams soon too. But it has been absolutely bonkers. So I'm going to have to talk about that stuff. I feel like there's like an accumulation that's coming up. And so when I get to that, accumulation, I will talk about what has been going on this full moon in Aries. Okay. But I will tell you that it does actually kind of connect to what I'm talking about right now. But this accumulation hasn't happened yet. You know, like you'll have a dream and then you'll have like a spiritual phenomenon and then you have a spiritual experience. And sometimes they're like leading up to something and then you know when the thing comes. So I don't know what the thing is yet, but I know that the thing is coming. You know, like even on my old podcast, I started the podcast right as we were like leaving our house in New Orleans. And I knew that we were going to be... So it was like a few months, I think, possibly before. And at that time, I've been getting all of these inclinations that it was time to leave New Orleans that year in 2021. But I didn't even, when I started the podcast, I didn't even know where we were going to be or, you know, where we're even settling down at. And then, we got to the point to where I was doing the podcast in the hotel like the month before we left to come to Phoenix, and then actually in Phoenix. So that was like such a fun thing. And those episodes are still up. So I have another podcast that is like a more full podcast. And that is over on Spotify. And I think it's Dimensional Dreams by DeeDee. Excuse me. So a lot of the ones I'm talking about on here are over on that podcast. And I think it'd be fun to like kind of hear it because you never hear the same story twice, right? And the only reason I haven't continued on that Spotify, just because, actually I'm not exactly sure why, because I could just put these podcasts on there, but I don't know, maybe I will at some point. But I didn't transfer them because the podcast was originally on Anchor. And I must have missed the email that said that it was transferring. It's 10:12, and I want to say that. I must have missed, the email that it was transferring. So none of the stems, I don't have any of the stems for those podcasts. So I have to redo them anyway. So anyways, that's like a little spiel that I kind of went off on a tangent, but let's get back on track. But anyways, what I can tell you this full moon for me has been about, so if it's showing up for you, then we're probably in a similar soul group or something like that. And I've kind of figured that's like how things go. Like you start meeting people who are having like really deep synchronicities with you and things like that because y'all are in like a soul group, right? Like let's say I had my quote unquote like spiritual, well, it's not quote unquote spiritual awakening, it was spiritual awakening in 2013. And then I started meeting people who had theirs like the 2012 2013 time period. Then I started meeting people who had their spiritual awakening around the 2015 2016 time period. Then I started meeting people who had theirs, back in 2009 time period. And so probably every year there's like people who are in queue for their awakening. So anyways, so I will say that it has to do with absinthe. Okay, it does have to do with absinthe, and it has to do with green fairies or green goblins. So yeah. So today we are going to be touching on that topic. Not exactly what's going on now, but a previous time where there were fairies around. So if you haven't had any experiences with like mythical creatures or anything like that, this is probably going to sound pretty outrageous to you. But hopefully it puts you like in the energy where you can start having these kind of experiences, because from what I have learned, different people are in tangent realities to each other. So even when you're in the same space as someone, right, which makes sense, you are living a different reality than them. But there's like an overall reality that is more, let's say, congruent with each other. And that's why like someone can be right next to you and you see a spirit and they don't see it, because that spirit is directly interacting with your energy field. Now then you have some people who are sharing an extremely parallel, right, reality with you, where they can see the spirit too, which means that the spirit is interacting with the both of you and want it to be a shared experience. And I found that it's the same thing with mythological kind of creatures and really all different type of ways of spirit or spirits, right? Just as a collective term, because there's many different types of spirits. Ancestors, loved ones, more human spirits. There's angelic spirits. There are fae spirits. There are werewolf spirits. Like pretty much what you can think of in this reality that has been shown to exist in some type of way does exist. But I will give a little bit of a disclaimer here. Okay, I will give a little bit of a disclaimer. So we're going to be talking about my 2 experiences with the Fae. So that's kind of like collective term for these kind of similar energies. So we're talking about gnomes, pixies, what are some other ones? I think goblins and stuff too are in this, hobgoblins and stuff like that. I think they're all a part of the Fae family too. So I have not seen them in like physically manifest in reality yet. And I'll say yet because I have come across people who who do interact with them. And so I know that at some point those realities are going to merge. Now, though I have not come across specifically fairies yet, I will tell you that I have had an experience with, they talk about in, is it like, I think it's Scottish or Irish stories, but I think Native Americans talk about these people too, where there are little people. I have seen the little people. I have. And it was so crazy because, a lot of these experiences, right, you're just having, like, let's say as a kid, or you're having before you know what the collective term is, before you even have a concept that there's a term for it, right? And so it's really wild to me that, I think back on times when I was having spiritual experiences before I had a concept that there's already a reality where these things have been defined and have been talked about, mythology stories about these things and everything. Like as a kid, I used to see a lot of stuff. I used to see passed on loved ones. I used to see like apparitions of Frankenstein. I kid you not. I used to see apparitions, like, especially when I was like scared. And so I don't know if these were like, energies around me, like projecting some of the energies, but like when I got scared, I would see Sesame Street characters as apparitions. So not just in my imagination, but actually out in physical reality. I remember one time, like one of the scariest experiences I have had in life, which actually connects to today, which I'll get to that. I actually did see an apparition of the Headless Horseman as well. So the little people, that was an apparition, so to speak. So there's many different even forms of apparitions too. It's a lot, because then there's like the shadow people, right? Which I've had experiences with shadow people, where you see like an apparition of a black spirit, right? Ooh, it's 10:19. I'm saying that. Apparition of a black spirit, but then sometimes the spirits come like, certain people who are mediums and have that ability. right? They can see certain loved ones or deities or whoever as apparitions that you can actually fully clearly see, even though they look like a watermark. And then some people have had experiences where they have seen people in reality clear as day, and then realize that that person was not someone that everyone could see. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's so many different layers and levels to everything. So the little person I saw was like this little short blonde. Well, she's not short. She was like, her body was proportional, but she was just like, I don't even know, like 2 inches tall, 1.5 inches tall, maybe 2 inches, but it's proportional. And she had blonde hair. This was like a traditional Caucasian looking woman. And she was wearing like a white kind of prairie kind of dress. And I'm saying that she was an apparition, but something else, because she ran across my bed and I could feel her little feet moving the covers. So she had some type of density to her as an apparition. So yeah, okay. So let's just get into the topic for today, because I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. It was 10:21. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent right now. Okay, so let's get into when I found out that fairies were real. Now, that's kind of an asterisk mark, because I feel like when I was little, I could have seen fairies, but it's like something that I don't quite remember right now. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have a sense of it somewhere, but you can't quite recall the memory right now. So I feel like when I was younger, like under 10, I used to see fairies, but I don't remember the experience. So this was in I think this was 2020. So I think it was November of 2020. I'm pretty sure it was November of 2020. Actually, it could have been like around the 11th or the 13th. It was one of these significant days that I see, because for me personally, October and November are always like the littest. I don't know if that's the term, littest or the most lit. They're like the most turned up months for me, okay? Like, and I'm talking about as far as spirit activity, astral projection, kind of like alternate consciousness situations. And even like, it's only like October 3rd today, and it's already been lit. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like October and November are always just wild months for me in general, to be honest. And I'm pretty sure that this was during that time period. So I remember being like, that's not what I was expecting to dream about. So there was a time period during this time period. So it could have been October, it could have been November, where I was really frustrated. Anger definitely makes things move sometimes. So I was really, really frustrated sitting in the house, in New Orleans that we were in. And I was frustrated mainly because I just felt like, I guess that I was setting a lot of intentions and really doing the best that I could, but it was just feeling like I couldn't get over a hump. Like, it was like really taking a lot of focus and time. And, when you're a Capricorn, Virgo placements, really trying to stick to a moral code with things, really trying to do things as perfectly as you can. And not that like I'm perfect by any means, but that's just more my default. Like, I try to be as present and deep, and I'm not trying in the sense that like, like I'm striving for it, but that's just like my natural disposition is to try to just do things. I guess it's kind of perfectionism, but naturally, that's who I am, even, when I was like really little, and so I was just feeling like things were taking really, really long for like a whole lot of work, and not like a whole lot of just stuff happening, I guess. not even necessarily like money. Like money was it, but just like just seeing the fruits of my labor, I guess. So I was really, really upset. And I remember like I just yelled out in the room, I'm like, is anybody helping me? And it's one of those moments where, just stress was accumulating. We had 4 kids at that time. My hormones are everywhere. I ended up doing this birth control shot, and like I ended up gaining like 35 pounds in like 2 months. I'm probably exaggerating because it was a little bit more than that, but it's just my energy levels were down, my hormones are everywhere, and we're like in the midst of the pandemic, and it was just like a really stressful time. So I'm like, what is going on? And so I ended up going to sleep, and when I went to sleep, I actually saw I kid you not, like I literally kid you not, I saw myself as a pixie. I promise you. Like I had little pixie body, I had like the iridescent, right? Is that like the kind of see-through but rainbow wings? Is that iridescent or fluorescent? I get those two mixed up. But anyways, and I was literally fluttering around a tree. And I'm still DeeDee, still giving DeeDee energy. And I see who I recognize to be my fairy godmother. Okay, she has the same fluorescent, kind of wings. We are not like quote unquote African American or black. Like we're not white, we're just pixies. Like we're just pixies. I don't know. But my facial structure did look the same as what I do now. So I was like in my perspective, in the body, fluttering around. And then I had like a second perspective that was also observing what was going on as well. And so I'm like fluttering around this tree that we live in, I guess, or live near, something like that. And this fairy godmother comes over to me, and she notices that I am upset. And I'm going through some type of, I guess, coming of age type of period in life in the fairy world. That's what's going on in this particular astral experience. And so it's a time period where it's kind of like a marked time where you don't have as many people just around you in general, because there's something about you having to kind of like sit within yourself. And when you sit within yourself, there's some type of spark that happens that's like a transition to adulthood. It's something like that. But in this moment, I was feeling very, very, very alone. And so she was coming over, and that's when I yelled out the same thing that I yelled out in waking life. And I'm like, is anyone out there, And immediately my soul or my spirit recognized, like, okay, this is a reflection of what is going on Earth right now. There's something that's going on multidimensionally that is very intertwined with what's going on Earth as well. And so this is a time period of like, instead of getting up in a rage, to just sit with it and know that certain processes are going to be difficult. And that's just period, and you learn that with having kids, especially multiple kids. There are stages, and you can have, the perfect crib, you can have the perfect, car, get them into school, perfect bedtime, blah, 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 all of these things perfect. But there are just certain stages that are hard, when they're learning to walk, they're going to fall. And that's a hard stage because you can't literally walk around with them all day while they're toddling around to make sure they never bump their head on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Even like Phoenix right now is going through the separation anxiety phase, and so it's like that phase, like as soon as you walk in the door, immediate hollering and screaming, and he wants to be on you all the time and on your leg, and sit with you and stuff, which is cute. And, but sometimes you're trying to get stuff done, right? Because we're not in a society where we can just live off of one income right now. And so, there are things that have to be done around the house and all different type of stuff. So it's not really like a luxury of being able to all day just like sit it out with him, right? Because I totally would do that. Like, we hit the lottery this week, then I totally would be fine just sitting with him and the kids, hiring someone to cook food and clean, and we just sit it out together, right? Like, just come on. I'm not going anywhere. Like, if I've got to sit with you for 3 months straight and we're just with each other all the time, so you understand mom's not going anywhere, like, I definitely would do that. But we just don't have that luxury at this moment, because it could change, right? And that's the interesting thing about reality is, like, I could be talking about this today and tomorrow I could win the lottery and it would be a totally different story, right? So anyways, that's what I got from the dream. And it was very interesting because as she was like kind of feeding into me and filling me up of like, this is unfortunately just a part of life that is inherently unpleasant. And it's just one of those growth processes that you go through that we can't help you with, because this is something internally, an internal process that is necessary for development. And it was almost like when she was talking about it, it's like we throughout the generations have tried to see if there are different protocols, and there are different protocols that you can take. But this one here of, going through this kind of alone period, but finding like your inner self at this age has been the one that's been the most beneficial. And so as she was telling me that, I started to see numbers around us. And so I had a number 10 around me and she had a number 40 around her. And that's when I understood that the fairy godmother, like in human terms, would be like a great grandmother, right? So I would be 10, so I would be like in the daughter position. And then 20 position would be the mother. 30 position would be grandmother. Yeah. And then 40... Woo! Must be the truth. Okay, wake up. Must be the truth. So, yes, the great grandmother position. And we talked about our, I guess, generations by numbers of 10, which I thought was interesting. And so that is like the equivalent of the fairy godmother is like the great grandmother. And so then I ended up, like, I actually saw myself fly back to my body, and then I woke up, which I thought was really, really cool. So I thought that was like really interesting because probably about, it's very rare for me to dream about the same thing, like even 2 nights in a row, or even like within the same month. Now, usually the things that I dream about are definitely related to each other, and through research and meditation and stuff like that, I find out that they are related to each other. But like, it's very rare that like I see someone in the dream and then I see them in my dream the next night and the next night and the next night, like consistently like that. And so I remember that later on that month, so again, either in October or November, I ended up having her come back in a dream a second time. And I was like, oh, this is a real thing. Like, this is like I know it's a real thing because I've been on this journey for like, it's crazy. It's about to be 2024. But I had this experience like in 2013. So like for literally like 10 years now, I've been figuring out like the spiritual world and how the spiritual world operates. So it's not that I didn't think that it was a real thing, but it's just like, I was like, oh no, she's like really around. like she's really around. And so this dream was really interesting. So there's this guy that I found his channel, and I will link one of his videos in the description, I guess. And it's actually funny how I found his channel, because there was another time in like this was in 2018, right after I had Ace. No, it was before I had Ace. It was before I had Ace, because I remember they went live on one of the Sundays that I had him. So sometime in 2018, after I had the Poseidon altar thing, which I thought was very interesting. Did I post about that? Did I repost that? I don't think I reposted that, but I will. I was again sitting in my kitchen in a different house, and I was yelling. So I do this sometimes, I'm not gonna lie to you, like where I yell at my guides and the energies around. I do, because I feel like it's like, I don't know exactly who's around all the time, but the energies usually that I'm around, which is kind of like in life too, are very familial energies. And so like I feel like there's space to be able to be angry and be like, I feel like this is not going correct, I feel like this is not going correct, and then usually they'll bring something around to my attention, like, actually we're helping out in this way, and then I'm like, oh, well, sorry, and then sometimes, like, it'll be a while and I see something start to change, and I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, like, this is what I was talking about. So it's like a real family type of vibe. So I do yell at them sometimes. I know some people are like, trying to love and light and unicorn farted, and it's I don't know, it just doesn't work out that way for me. So anyways, I was in the kitchen and I was yelling again. I was yelling again, and I was just like, I need some deeper information, because I was having a whole lot of spiritual experiences in this particular house, which was on Delichet in New Orleans. So not Delichet, that was the last house. This house on Ursuline, which is really, really deep. Ursuline, I went to Ursuline Academy, and I found out some wild stuff about Ursuline and Ursuline Academy. That's for another day. Ursuline nuns, so that's for another day. But we're like literally having spiritual phenomenon in this house on Ursuline. Like I can't even tell you all the stuff that was going on. And I got to a point to where I realized that there was like a very angry spirit in the house. Now, I knew that angry spirit, like somebody has on the back of their car, Denny. I wonder what that means, Denny. But anyways, there's like this really angry spirit. And by that time I could tell when it was like spirit activity, because like stuff starts going haywire, and it's just like, this is just not like a everyday life situation. Like every time we turned around, something was breaking down, like, and stuff that like nobody was touching, the air condition, like the appliances, like just FYI, if you are figuring out spiritual phenomenon, I found that the easiest thing for spirits to do when they're trying to really get your attention is playing with electronics, especially lights. So, like even a few days ago, I had this crazy experience, which is what I was talking about earlier, where I was sitting outside of a building and I was listening to someone, and okay, so like it gets dark outside, right? And in buildings the lights come on. The lights were already on. I just want to say that, because some people who don't experience this or haven't experienced it yet will be like, oh, it could have just been, no, the lights were already on. And this happens enough, so I know what's going on. But I'm just saying for people who have not had this happen. So I was sitting outside this building. I was listening to this man talk, and the lights literally flashed off and then came back on when he said something. And I was like, okay. So, the first time it happens, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm taking notes of it. And if it happens again, then I probably really need to take notes of it. And I kid you not. So I wasn't even looking in the direction of the lights. Okay. So it was like subconsciously I got a ding to turn towards the building. And that's when they went off and then came back on. And I was like, oh, snap, something is going on. So I'm like, okay. Then I looked in my rearview mirror, because I was sitting in the car listening to this video. I looked in the rearview mirror, and then the lights behind me, on a building behind me in the rearview mirror, which I was not looking in the rearview mirror. But again, like I said, I got some type of subconscious ding to where I looked up at the perfect time, and the lights behind me on another building, they went off and flashed on. Then later on, I pulled up to the house because I was like, there's a lot of stuff going on. Something must be happening tonight. This is like, you know, like something must be happening tonight. Child, I'm have to, that is supposed to be talking. Whew. So then I get to the house and I notice that we have like, you know, all these black cats around. And they really like our house because we put out a lot of trash because we just have a lot of people. So we have a lot of trash, a lot of food scraps and stuff, especially when you're dealing with kids. They're always throwing food and stuff on the ground. So we have a lot of black cats around. Well, it's interesting because, you know, now we've been at the place we're staying at for like a while now. Like it'll be like a year in February or whatever. And so now they realize like we're not, you know, harmful humans. So they don't even, you know, scatter and stuff like that. They're just like sitting on the trash when we come outside. And so I saw this cat that I haven't seen before. And it was like walking underneath our garage. And then it was almost walking like it was going to walk up to our door. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Now, it couldn't see me. And so I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. I wonder why it's walking up to the door. So I decided to get out and I leaned down to see if it would come to me, which it did not. It was like, nah, girl. And I'm like, but this is my door, though. Like, you really came here to have a conversation with me, right? Like, are we doing this or not? And as I was leaning down, I kid you not, as I was leaning down to pet the cat, I, again, got a subconscious ding, and I just start looking to my left at this neighbor's house. So we have this neighbor across the street from us that I think they have like a light net or something that they put over their yard. And so at night it lights up. And literally I saw the lights go off on just a portion. So not the whole light net. Not all of it, but a portion of it went off and then it came back on. And I was like, oh snap, something is definitely going down tonight. So anyways, I'm just saying, when I was like, you know, taking all the way back, I know I'm like going off on all these different tangents. I know I am, like, I promise you I'm going to do timestamps at some point in time. I'm going to go back and do timestamps. Like, just work with me, okay? So that was what was going on in the house. Like, just stuff breaking down, lights going out, coming back on, blowing out, like, just like doing the most. And so I ended up figuring out what that spirit was, but then there was more activity, you know, and then I didn't even realize that we're in the middle of like a crime, drug infested neighborhood. And so I'm like, it could be so many different energies that's going on right now. Like, I don't even know how to track it down, because it could be so many energies right now that I'm just not aware of. And so I was really annoyed, and I was like, I need some more spiritual information, because I'm like just in the sea of all of this stuff happening and I don't know what's happening. And so I found this person's channel. I literally don't even know how, but like his channel just popped up. So anyways, taking all the way back, because I'm supposed to be talking about the second dream right now, right? Oh gosh. Supposed to be talking about the second dream right now. Okay, and then I'm gonna head back to the house. So in this second occurrence that happened, oh no, wait, no, I'm thinking about it now. This dream actually happened way before the first one. I'm actually getting it incorrect. Oh no, wait, hold on. No, wait, I'm confusing myself. No, I'm talking about when I got to this person's channel. No, the second dream happened sometime October, November 2020. It's about the person in the dream. Okay, so the second dream. So in the second dream, okay, I was just kind of like in this space. So it was kind of like a void space. It wasn't like the cosmos. It was just kind of an all black space. And I could see the fairy godmother that I had just remember earlier that month. I could see her and this guy's channel, this guy from the channel that I was telling you about. I could see them arguing with each other, like fighting with each other, like verbally, you know, not physically, but verbally arguing with each other. and I could see like this bubble out in front of me, which I knew was like, oh, I can't hear what they're saying. I could see them, and I could see how they're interacting with each other, and I could even see, it was very interesting, I could even see the like energy waves that were coming off of them, and I'm like, ooh, they're really getting into it. So I could see the sound waves, but it wasn't reaching. Yeah, I could see the sound waves, but I was like surrounded in a bubble that was blocking the sound waves from getting to my ears. Oh, that makes sense. And like, oh my gosh, what was I seeing? It's probably sound waves, but you have to be able to have the sound waves reach your ears to hear it. So I was like, watching them fighting, and I remember I was kicking my legs like a little girl. I was kicking my legs. I'm like, ooh, they're really upset with each other. And so he was like doing these motions, and she was doing these hand motions and stuff. And the gist that I got was that they were fighting he was fighting for me to remember something. And she was saying that she didn't think that it was the right time. It wasn't appropriate yet. They agreed that like in this lifetime, I should remember it. But the timing, he thought it was necessary right now for me to remember it. And she thought that it could wait a little bit longer. And so I guess she understood his opinion. And so she reluctantly was like, okay, fine. Right. And so, next thing I know, he is coming towards me. Okay. And he was yelling too. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if like what he wants me to remember is like something positive or negative, because like he looks really upset and irritated. But I mean, he was just yelling with my fairy godmother. So I guess, it's still just residual, whatever. And so I still had the sound bubble on, and he was like yelling, and I was motioning at him like, can't hear you, buddy. Like when people are already upset, they just like yell louder when you can't hear them. And so I was like, you could yell as loud as you want, but I just like can't hear you. And so that's when I realized, I was like, oh, okay, I have to break the sound bubble. Like it's me actively choosing not to hear it. And so I decided to just focus on him. And as I was focusing on him, I could start to hear him. And I told him, I was like, okay, I can hear you now. Like, we good. Like, calm down some, please. Thanks. And so as I was hearing him, he was like, you need to remember Carthage. And I was like, Carnage? And he was like, not Carnage. You need to remember Carthage. And I was like, okay, I need to remember Carthage. And then he said a word, and he said Queen Elishat. And at this moment, same thing like with the Jupiter being that was speaking like the language or whatever. And then I was speaking this language, it's like when you don't know the language, you don't know what they're talking about, what they're saying. And so it all just kind of sounds like gibberish. So he was speaking English, then he started just speaking something else. And I was like, okay. And so then he literally showed me, and it was so funny because at this point in time, I had just started watching this couple on Facebook, which I might check in on them because it seems like people are in breakup season right now. And I'm hoping that they're not breaking up, because last I heard they were like getting engaged and hopefully a baby or something like that. But there was a couple that I was watching on Facebook, just randomly. I just started watching them for like 3 months before this happened. And their name was like Charles and Alyssa. And he kept showing me her face, and she's got like really pretty blue eyes. And he was like, Alyssa, Queen Alyssa, Carthage. And I'm like, okay, cool. He was like, you need to remember. And so I started repeating it. I need to remember Carthage, because sometimes you'll have that experience in the dream world where they're really telling you something and they're like, don't forget it. And then you wake up, right? And you've forgotten it. So we were saying it back and forth. I'm like, okay, Carthage, Queen Alyssa, Elishat, and I started to figure out that it was like the name, but I didn't know exactly how to spell it, right? Because I didn't know what language it is, and depending on what language it is, you know, it could sound like how it sounds to us in English, but it could mean something else, you know, like go, right? If someone is telling you about go, it depends on what language, because we say G-O, but then you have like Van Gogh, right? Which is also G-O-G-H. And then you have like, if you're from New Orleans, like the French spelling of things, which would be G-E-A-U-X. And so I'm like, okay, Alyssa, Carthage. And that's what the fairy godmother was like. She didn't think that it was necessary for me to remember whatever was going on in that lifetime at this point in time right now. And so I'm like, okay, Alyssa and Charles. And I think the first thing I went to go do was check out Alyssa and Charles' video first. But then I was like, okay, Carthage sounds pretty easy to find, which I found it. And I'm kidding you not. I don't think that in school I studied or read about the Queen of Carthage. I had no clue about Queen Elishat of Carthage. Like, zero clue at all whatsoever about Dido. And so when I was reading this story, I was like, okay. You know, because there's like, you know, the Shakespeare play, I think. Is it a Shakespeare play? I don't know if it's Shakespeare, but there's a play written about her, which I still haven't read the play yet. And then, you know, people are debating her how do you say that? Historicity? Ooh, child. We'll just say that. Historical accuracy. And I was like, okay, well, that solves it for me. It definitely is a real person. So probably the Aeneas part might not be true, and that might be, you know, creative direction, but she definitely did exist. Then I started doing like some really deep research into Jezebel and like this whole line of Phoenician kings and queens, and then her brother Pygmalion and stuff like that. And what I will say, what I ended up seeing in dreams, so don't quote me exactly on this, because this is not stuff that I have found just on the internet, like to be in line with what I'm saying, but what I saw was that a lot of the story is true, and I haven't read the play, so I don't know if this is what the play says, but there is a guy that was in ancient Algiers, which I used to live close to a city called Algiers, actually, which Algiers is like, is that present day Morocco? It's over there somewhere, you know, where Carthage also is. So she's supposed to be a Phoenician princess that her brother killed her uncle husband or something like that to take his gold and to rule a throne or something like that. And, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to recount the whole story right now, but she ended up in North Africa to run away. Now, what I remember, what I saw in the dream was that there was a fight going on between her people in Lebanon over a space that it seemed like they already had control over in Africa. So this was like a space that maybe they didn't have like a tight grip on, but there was some type of connection that they did have to it. So there was something going on with her and the family at that point in time. But there was also another war going on between the people, like the men of Algeria, and this spot that they had. So there's two fights on two fronts. One that was a more personal front with like her and these group of people that came with her. But she definitely had a male, let's say, I don't know why I want to say overseer, but that's kind of what it felt like. Overseer who was from back home. So they were aware of where she went. And then there was also this war brewing with this other family that they weren't related to, I don't think, in old Algiers. And so how they were going to try to solve the issue with the Algerians, we'll just call them Algerians, was that they were trying, which it seemed like this guy wanted to marry her, but I know that his name was Hierobas. So Hairbas, or Hier. No, I think it was Hairbas, something like that. Hierobas, that was his name. And he wanted to court her. He wanted to marry her. Okay, he wanted to marry her. Okay. And he was associated, I think his father was Jaba or Juba, like Juba. And it could have been Juba the first. And I found these people like in history too, because I had a dream about it in history. Now, I don't know how history is putting them together, but Juba was the father. And then Hierobas was, I'm pretty sure, the son or grandson, because I think they also do the thing where, you know, like Hierobas, son of Juba, could be that Juba was like, you know, the head patriarch, and so everybody is a son of his, to say like the last big person that they came from. Do you know what I'm saying? But he also was directly also like either a son or grandson, so it wasn't just like generations and they go back to Juba. He was also directly either a son or grandson. I'm pretty sure it was a son though. And so, but there was another guy from home that they wanted her to remarry, which I'm assuming was like the guy that was her escort over here to North Africa. And so the Hierobas person also ended up sacking Carthage, I think kind of like just out of being angry because he felt like she was going to choose this other person to be her husband instead of him. It was like a jealousy thing. I'm not going to lie to you. And so I'm pretty sure, now this part, I'm not exactly sure the time frame or timeline of how this went on, but I know that this Hierobas person also had control over either one or two islands as well. And I know they say that she died in this pyre of fire or whatever, but I don't know the time frame of that because I didn't specifically say that. So I'm not saying that did happen or didn't happen. But what I do know is that she got taken as a prisoner of war to one of these two islands that this Hierobas person owned or took over and was now controlling or something like that. It was definitely an island, and I saw it. So I don't know what island it was, but I know that he was jealous because she looked like she was leaning towards someone else, and he wanted to marry her. And since, you know, he was like putting a lot of pressure on her, and I definitely remember her contemplating suicide to get out of this arrangement, but also, you know, kind of like a situation of, I don't know if I would say dishonor. I don't know if that was necessarily it, but there's definitely something about them losing the stronghold in Carthage that also played a role in it. And so it's almost like an offering of herself that it was a little bit ritualistic, like an offering of herself, like as not being a good leader. But I can't say that I saw her actually go through with it though. But I do remember definitely seeing her captured by this Hierobas person and being a prisoner on an island. I'm pretty sure, like I said, it was two islands, and she was a prisoner of war on one of them. And I feel like this island was near Algeria. Like, it felt like it was in that area, so it wasn't like some other part of the world. You know, relatively near Algeria, I guess. So yeah. So So yeah, and it's funny because like since then I haven't really had another memory specifically about that, but Phoenician stuff comes up all the time for me now. Phoenician stuff comes up a lot of the time for me now, and so I'm like, oh, okay, like the purple, and I think for some reason I think that they had some kind of version of taffeta material before it became a thing. I'm pretty sure they had some type of connection to a taffeta, like purple cloth that was a part of a royal dress at some point in time, pretty sure. And that connected into like Nebuchadnezzar II. So I don't know what time period he existed, but I think he existed like before they said that taffeta was a thing. And I think that dress had to do with Phoenician history. So anyways, okay. So I've got to get back to these kids, everyone. So if you sat through these streams of consciousness and you're able to, like, follow what I was saying, shout out to you. I hope that it put some connections together for you. And as always, make sure to do all the fun things that we like to do here on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, heavy on the commenting. Come back and comment once, twice, 3 times, 6 times. I really like it. I enjoy it. Okay. If you have any specific questions or anything like that, if you want any services, all of those things will be in the description box below. And I'd also be curious too if you've had dreams about Queen of Carthage or connections to it or visions and you think it's connected or something like that. I would love to hear about it. I really believe that people have different pieces of the puzzle, and that, when people come into our lives, we're all putting these pieces of the puzzle together, and I find it really, really fun. So yeah. All right, friends. I will be back in the next video.